Thanks for being here. My name is Tiffany Kelly. I'm the Director of Alumni and Family Relations. I think I've met all of you by now several times. Thanks for coming over. Actually, my family's here too. My husband and my daughter are in the back. Ava has her CC shirt on.
She's hiding.
So I have the pleasure of interviewing our Alumni Association Award winners, and I would actually like to leave some time for all of you to chime in, but we will get started now. So actually, I should mention too that Will Smith will probably join us a little bit later. So I would love to start with what brought you to CC. You all came at different times for different reasons. I guess, John, we'll start with you.
Is this working? No. I applied to USC and Reed and got in all these Occidental and all these other cool schools. And the block plan just started growing on me, and I realized that I wanted to be a geologist for a month to see if I wanted to be a geologist, and then to be a biologist. And I got an F, you guys. I flunked philosophy of science with Hans Krim. Remember him with his pipe and everything? 17 out of 24 of us flunked it. And then I retook it and got an A because I learned something. But I knew after that block I would not want to be a philosopher. That's what the block plan for me, for sure.
Thank you. I grew up here, so Carlisle College, I would walk through the campus and look at all the students and get excited about the opportunity. And I thought about Reed and Antioch and all sorts of other places, but it's always been a home of my heart, and I love the area and I love what it has to offer. And I think that what CC offers is very unique from a lot of the other universities and college experiences in so many ways. It's really broad and diverse, and I always thought, as a high school student walking through, everybody was very friendly and embracing, and to me, the diversity and the energy of the place was wonderful, and it was only complemented, I think, by the block system, which is, as you said, just a great way to absolutely immerse yourself in a subject. And if you didn't like it, you got through it quick. And if you loved it, it would be with you forever, and just reverberate throughout your life. And that's been, I have so many memories of, I can't remember the name of the science museum, but our class would meet at like 2:00 in the morning because Venus was rising, and what an experience. Geology, we went to our...
If it was college, I'm sure Venus was rising a little earlier than that.
Well, you see how much I learned. You see how much I learned from that class, but... geology class, spending literally a week of the entire month at our professor's cabin inside the Rockies, and we went hiking and exploring every day, and came back to tea and cookies from his wife, and it was just a really magical experience, and just incredibly unique. So it was a great start for me.
Is this work? Yeah, it is. Well, I didn't come to CC as a student. I did as a professor, for those of you who were over over at the chapel. But I had no regrets whatsoever about coming to CC. It was an absolutely wonderful experience for me. And unlike others who go to more restrictive colleges or universities where they tell you to teach your doctoral work and that's it, I was able to do all kinds of things over the first 4 or 5 years of teaching. And it was hard work, and you really had to put your nose to the grindstone, but I learned a great deal. And I'll never forget being able to teach, and this is in a slightly different vein, my doctoral dissertation work, of course, on William Carlos Williams, the great American nature poet. And how gratified I was to have students who really loved Dr. Williams and thought his poetry was superb, and just wonderful, wonderful students. Came from all parts of the country, and it was, I just feel I know about other people who were struggling at various universities. That never happened for me at the CC, and I think it didn't happen for my good friend Dan Tynan, who came a year before me too. That it was just a great introduction to what a liberal arts education is about. And actually, the first talk I ever gave for the college was in Albuquerque with Gresham Riley, talking about modernism and the liberal arts. So it was a good fit, and I loved it. And I think I grew enough to stay interested in what I was doing and always interested in my students and to keep exploring new ways of thinking about the world.
Well, what brought me to Colorado College was a high school counselor who said, you have to go to Colorado College. It's the best school in Colorado. And you have to go there, you have to experience it, you have to get motivated to want to go to college. And I said, okay, I'll try it. Came here, fell in love with the place. The people are amazing. And that's what kept me here was the people. I did go back to school and get a bachelor's and a master's, but that's essentially why I came here and why I stay is for the people.
So we've all read a little bit about your career path and what you did after CC, but tell us a little bit about what you love about what you do and what brought you to that work.
We'll start at that end.
You can start with Brenda. What do you love about what you do?
John.
We'll go back this way.
Okay. What brought me to see? Well,
What do you love about
what do I
what
love
you do?
about CC? See, now you threw me off, John. What I love about CC, what I love about what I do.
Your work.
We do over 400 events a year in our office, and what makes me get up every day is the fact that people that come to these events are so gratified and so appreciative, and I know that I've made an impact in some little way in their life. They've come here, they've heard a panelist, they've heard a speaker, they've heard Oprah. They've heard something that has sparked something in them, and that's what keeps me doing the work that I do. I have a fantastic team, and we all do work together, and this place is amazing. So that's what keeps me going and why I came here and why I stay.
Well, the story about Brenda, if you find out she's made a call to you on the telephone, some people wait to jump when Brenda starts speaking. I'm already 4 feet in the air when Brenda calls, saluting at the same time. You'll do it, and you'll do it yesterday. We talked at dinner on Thursday, and it may be somewhat of a cliche, but I think there's enough truth in it to repeat that. What we were talking about. The great thing about Colorado College is that we have these fabulous students, but they're not all nose to the grindstone. It seems like the brow continues to unfurl as the farther west you get from the east coast, and that the students are very much in love with earning, but it's not like a savage act for them to be in classes with you. They're just wonderful kids, and they learn a lot. And I find it an absolute pleasure to learn from them. And I should say that the opportunity to teach film that began probably after about my 10th year at CC was extraordinary for me. And I realized then that that was the palette I wanted to work with as a professor more than anything else. And the college was very supportive about that. And it's been a wonderful experience.
Gosh, I don't know where to start. The work we do primarily is with children in disadvantaged communities. And, you know, I went in as any American would, you know, with a great idea of what thought would work and got down on the ground. And within a week, we scrapped the plan and sat down in the village and listened to all the village leaders and the wonderful people in the community that had such inherent wisdom to share with us. And, you know, meeting the kids, I've always loved children. I actually went to Kenya by mistake. I was trying to get back into Rwanda after doing a a medical mission during genocide, Rwanda, and fell in love with a little girl that stole my heart, and that's the story behind A Very Long Braid. And when I went back to try to get a hold of her, I got stuck in Nairobi because the borders were then closed, and I knew I had taken time off work to find this child, so I asked them if there's anything that they needed done and if there was anything I could do as a medical worker, and they sent me to this lovely village town called Makindu, and it was totally a detour. And I think, as you know, those detours and those flat tires can often be the most meaningful things that you run into, and that was kind of my experience. The families that we work with have so little material worth, and they just celebrate every moment of every day, and they're so grateful, very gratified for what they have, and it's still, coming in back and forth over 21 years now since we started the program. It never ceases to amaze me, just that transition of coming back to the U.S. and what we have and what we don't really appreciate. So it's really been for me a blessed detour and totally an adventure. I feel really, really so fortunate to have had that experience.
So I'm going to throw more Latin out. Ancora imparo is not Latin, it's Italian. And it was said by a guy at the age of 87, flat on his back, painting the Sistine Chapel. And that guy is Michelangelo. And ancora imparo translates to still learning. And that's kind of, I guess, what I think CC instilled in me, and that by taking over this lodge with Lily and the family and getting the vets in there and getting the Women's Olympic water polo team to be there for 7 days, silent retreat, and 10 days total, climbing 4 14ers. This is all in the last 2 weeks. All the stuff I'm learning from them, as you were saying, John, the things you learn from the people you're working with and helping, gives back to you way more. I also, as they said in the talk, I really love breaking down the silos. So today, you probably will hear about the guy that broke the marathon 2-hour barrier. That was done with the help of a guy that's going to be working next to my office in about 2 weeks. Peter Vint led the team behind the team to help that accomplishment take place, even though it won't be a world record because he had a chase car, kind of helping him time things and things like that. So this silo breaking of working with the NHL and going down to spring break in Scottsdale and helping the Cleveland Indians get these aha moments, because you're kind of an outsider, you're not threatening to them. And I love being able to do that, knowing that they've made a change in their learning, and mostly that they're going to be more effective and efficient learners, whether it's English or medical school or whatever. There's a lot of progress being made on how do you learn more effectively and quicker. And in my sporting world, there's some great changes going on, and I love being a part of it.
So each of you kind of touched on this, but what kind of challenges have you had in your career path and setbacks, and how have those shaped you? I think that's something that we talk about in higher education with students, and getting them to understand that taking a risk is okay, and failing forward. So talk a little bit about challenges and what that means and how that's important.
Well, in my sport, when I was a player hopeful, we couldn't qualify for the Olympics. So you saw a 6 to 8 Olympic team back when there's 3 or 4 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, and we did not compete in the Olympic Games till 1984. We had a 16-year gap, and that gap was pretty challenging. We had to make changes in our training to succeed, and to do things. We even did Outward Bound course with the 84 team, and to make that possibility, because 221 countries attempt to get into the Olympics, and 12 do. And 209 nations stay home for 4 years, and you don't see them on television. And that was us for 16 years. So I think that was the biggest challenge, because since then, only Brazil and the U.S. have been to every Olympic Games in volleyball since 1984. So that it's not that the challenges aren't there, it's that they're not as large anymore because we keep going to the Olympics. I'd say for me, personally also, starting in 96, 95, I worked with the Paralympic side. And the Paralympic side really puts you in your place because they're competing with no arms, they're competing with no legs. My dear friend Mike Hewlett, who recently passed away, was a quad amputee, and he's still coaching the sport even though he had no arms or legs. And so when you put him to bed at the Olympic or the Paralympic Games, Mike, if your attitude doesn't flip, I'm not going to put you together in the morning so you can get out of your bed. You got to be nicer about this stuff. And it's just that world which we're now in with the veterans as well, and the first responders has been a challenge. But the reason it's so wonderful is because you're helping those others that have had some challenges.
Thank you. As I said before, starting the program, I was completely clueless, which is a good way to be. I think you're innocent and soaking things in, but any challenges that I had were just so quickly surpassed by the community and the folks that we worked with. And they just find a way of making things work. And from day one, when we started the center, and there as the director for the first 4.5 years, it was crisis intervention 24/7 for us. And so, I laugh when I think about challenges, because you just had to not even worry about it, because you just had to go where the universe and the day was taking you, and the emergency and the crisis of the moment. And that just shaped the day. And it shaped, I think, all of us to approach life with gratitude and some fortitude. John and I were talking about, I think one of the biggest challenges for me is I'm rather shy and find all of this quite embarrassing. And thank you. It's a good cause, but one huge challenge for me was learning to speak up, because I'm quite more quiet, and with this type of work, you really have to be a pretty fierce advocate, and that was a great lesson for me to still hopefully go through the world in a gentle wind, but maybe a tornado once in a while is not such a bad thing, and to get things done. I think that for me was the biggest challenge to overcome.
Well, my experiences at Colorado College have been nothing like our two previous winners of awards. I mean, they've really been in the trenches and doing extraordinary work. And it would be completely beyond bounds for me to talk about family life and difficulties we've had within our family, because everybody has difficulties within their family. That kind of travail goes with the business. I could talk professionally about certain things that have been difficult for me, but I don't think it pales in comparison to what we've already heard. I would just say in passing that learning how to teach Ulysses was like climbing the Matterhorn in the nude. You don't know if you're going to make it to the top. And watch out for those Rocky Mountain goats. Part of the obstacle course. I was all alone doing it, and I just, year after year, I got a little bit better at it. But if you really want to teach Ulysses, be prepared to eat some crow, suffer some humiliations. But the sheer joy that comes from, I mean, that passage from Laurie Laker that was read this morning by Susan is just an example of Joyce's genius. You can't encompass it. You can't hold it all in your head. But that's part of the joy of Joyce. It's just so amazing to encounter an experience like that. But no, I can't really talk about work situations that are anywhere comparable to these extraordinary people to my right. And here's an extraordinary person to my left.
I would say that one of the challenges that I've incurred over my career is that not every supervisor has been the best. And so when you have those difficult situations, it's how do you address it? How do you encounter it? How do you overcome it? And I have these talks with my kids all the time. It's like every supervisor is not going to be the best. But it's how you come out and how you address it with them is what's important. And sometimes there is no resolution and you have to find something else, but it's always what's best for you. One of the things at Colorado College in my career is I've had the fortunate ability to work with students in our office in almost every capacity. And the students come to me and they're like, I'm done, I quit. And I'm like, but why are you quitting? I said, figure out where the challenges is. How do you overcome those? How do you communicate with your supervisor? What is your communication style? And how do you overcome that and either figure out this is where you want to be or this is not where you want to be? And sometimes they'll sit back and they'll go, this is not where I want to be. And here's where I want to go. So life is not perfect. You have to overcome those challenges to figure out where you're going to move to the next level.
So Brenda, this morning you said that behind every great leader is a great team. So who have some of your mentors been along the way?
Well,
Who are those people?
she's sitting right there. President Tiefenthaler. She's amazing.
And why?
And why? She sets the example, I would say, for all of us. She has a high standard, and she portrays that to all of us. So we follow, we listen, we've learned a lot from her. There's, when I first started my career, it was David Lord, and he was in finance and administration. And he, again, had high standards for the college. So I think it's those people that you look up to, that teach you, that push you a little bit, and you're like, why do you want me to do that? Okay, I got it. But you have to learn from them to say, I get it, I understand why you want us to go in this direction, why we're going in this direction. And I've been fortunate to have some great role models in my life. And those are two that are phenomenal.
I had some very interesting chairs over the years at CC. When I first came in 1971, and there are people in this room who remember Neil Reinitz, who was the department chair. We called him the Big Bear, and he lived up to his reputation. In many ways, Neil was one of the most ferocious people I've ever known, but he was also hardworking and fair and conscientious and a really, really good chair. He fought for the department's interests. Sometimes he'd get in fights on the faculty floor, and the rest of us would just sort of retreat to a corner of the room. I miss Neil, though. He was an astonishing human being. I have mentors who I didn't really know that well, but actually, again, it's Ulysses, Richard Ellman, with whom I studied Joyce at the University of Chicago. But more than that, Hugh Kenner, who's a great polymath scholar of all modern literature, who wrote from the inside out. And his book on Ulysses, the sort of quotidian or everyday existence of Leopold Bloom, the hero, and all these wonderful details that he added to the study of this massive and sort of monumental book was a help to me to know that there were real human beings who were living and dying and suffering and worrying about this and that. And despite the extraordinarily Homeric design of the book and the Shakespearean ghost that haunts it throughout, Kenner was able, and he visited CC, gave a wonderful talk. Kenner was able to kind of take it down to the raw reality which it was, in spite of that extraordinary artifice that Joyce possessed. And so I got to know Kenner fairly well. He was completely deaf, and watching him lecture and just how he did it was really extraordinary. He'd read your lips, or when he was speaking to an audience, it was really quite extraordinary to watch this prodigious mind at work, and what a model he is to anybody who's ever taught James Joyce, too. And by the way, I should say about Richard Ellman, who was also a brilliant teacher, and Hugh Kenner, they hated each other's guts. That's the way it always goes. There are just enough mountains to go around.
I think my first obvious mentor was our mom. She was one fierce lady and quite unique and very idiosyncratic and quite the stubborn advocate, and started life from a father who never thought women should go to college or get an education. That was what was the need. And anyway, went on from there, and many cultural explorations and many reading adventures inspired by our family. We were not brought up in any one religion. We were, every Sunday we were supposed to study another culture and another religion. And what an experience, you know. And so over the years, I've really been fortunate to have many mentors. Nelson, go from Khalil Gibran and Nelson Mandela and down to John Lennon. I'll add John Lennon in there, but down to the ground where with the kids that we work with, those are the true mentors for me, because they really teach you so very much. It's incredibly humbling, and it's really fun for me now. Some of the kids that we started off with the program who were street kids and really pretty incredible situations when they first joined the program are now coming back to the program and mentors to the other kids there. And yeah, it's been quite an experience. So I've lived a life with many mentors. Pretty incredible.
I think three come to mind. One is, like you're saying, Winnie, my mom. She was a first grade teacher. And I would go to class, and I would be older, and I would just sit there and watch her for 40 years teach first graders and see how to work with developing minds, for lack of a better term. The next one was in 75, Carl McGowan from BYU. He, professor of motor skill learning, motor learning, and he flipped my head around how to coach and train, and brought the science that I've spoken about early on. He was part of every Olympic gold medal and team since '84 until he passed away in 2016. And Carl mentored me by also letting me go skiing with him or go fly fishing. You go to a gym in a world and it's always the same. It's a gym. But you go fly fishing and you actually see where you are, and you get out into the country. And that was a big part of what he did, and he helped my family, as well. And finally, the third one is a gal that you may have seen on television, Long Ping. She kicked our butts in the '84 Olympics. They won the gold, China, when they first came out into the world of sport. And she was the star. She was the Iron Hammer. Televised weddings and coins of her and stamps of her, so famous. But 4 months after she kicked our ass in L.A., she was living in my house. And that's because of a Chinese proverb that winning and losing are temporary, but friendships last forever. And I challenge a lot of, if you've got kids, get them to go across the net, go across the field, and meet the kid or kids that are the best, because they're sharing that same joy of the sport that you happen to be doing. It doesn't have to be volleyball. And in my case, we became friends. She lived with me, learned English because she didn't speak any English at the time. We taught her English, taught her the U.S. way of training. And long story short, in '92, she silvered with China. In 2008, she coached the USA women's team in Beijing to a silver medal, beating China, her own country. And then she returned back to China and became the first woman to ever win a Olympic gold medal in our sport of volleyball when she won the games in Rio de Janeiro. So I think those are the big three, along with this guy that I keep mentioning, Mike Hewlett, who just put me in my place because my favorite story about Mike, when they chopped off his legs, because of a diabetes thing, so they chopped off his legs to save his life and his arms too. And he goes, they said, how tall do you want to be? Because they're going to put on these fake legs, And his answer was, make me 6'4", so I'm taller than Kessel. And that's the kind of relationship we had.
So the last question I'll end with is one of the reasons I love working in education is you're just surrounded in rich soil, and I feel like you never know what wisdom you're going to gain for the day. And so this morning I heard two really great quotes. One from our own Will Smith, who said, the pursuit of life should be fun. And the other was from one of the elders from the Ute tribe, who I spent time with after the morning blessing, who said, forgive and you will change history. So I would like to know from you all, what do one of those or both of those quotes mean to you?
Yeah, forgive and you'll change history. So many people dwell in the past, and you can't control the past. It's done. And if you can get past those transgressions and move on into what you can control, which is right now. In my office, I have a meteorite that's about this big, and I think about, what if that meteorite just ripped through the sky, not into the soil, but came right here and see ya, I'm all out of here. Life is so random that you just want to embrace every moment that you have, and forgiveness is a huge part of it, for sure.
Yeah, I think as well, embracing life is huge. So many of us go through life as a bit of a automaton, particularly in our culture and our society. Things are kind of regimented and organized, and we go through the motions, but don't really live those moments. And as Will said, really immersing yourself into life and into the experiences makes it all so much more rich. And on the mention of forgiveness, I think that all of us need to be humbled. And forgiveness is a wonderful way of allowing us to do that, teaching us to do that, because we kind of let go of ourselves and our angst. And it's all great to have passion, but a lot of it is it's not receptive. And forgiveness is accepting that the other human being who may have transgressed you or offended you or insulted you in some way actually is a human with many of the same experiences and thoughts and challenges that you've had. And it's a grand thing, I think, to forgive. I never liked the expression forgive and forget because I think forgiveness gives you the gift of actually doing the opposite, and that's remembering and embracing those moments.
And what's the other one? I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget what you did. That kind of thing. Yeah. I tend to, maybe I felt like from my childhood, I've been kind of a loner of a child for various reasons, and to tend to find myself gravitating toward controversial subjects. And in my writing and in the book I co-authored with a graduate school friend, Bob Merrill, on Sam Peckinpah. I don't think I could have picked a more challenging subject. If you know anything about Peckinpah, he's a brilliant, brilliant director. He made westerns, the most famous of which is The Wild Bunch, which was always a subject of controversy. And I've actually been to events where, when I was going to give a paper on Peckinpah, people would get up and walk out. I didn't mind that, really. I kind of accepted it as a challenge. When friendships move in that direction, it's more painful. And that happened to me on numerous occasions as well. I'll give you an example, although that example hasn't reached a negative point yet. About a couple months ago, Vince Bizdek, my good friend who's a graduate of CC, I've known him for many, many years, who's now the editor of the Colorado Springs Gazette, asked me to write something on Quentin Tarantino's new film, Once Upon a Time in America. I said, oh man. Why did I say that? Yeah, that's the Leone movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Freer, my wife, was sitting over there. We went and saw it 3 times in 1 week. First of all, we were absolutely transfixed by it. And also, secondly, we thought, my God, this is Tarantino with a heart and a pulse, rather than this wildly violent films, which are brilliantly written and all, but there's some human element missing to them. And I think that film attracted us in part because it was in part about Tarantino's youth growing up in Hollywood, in that area, Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard. And as a young boy, and traveling around with his stepfather and having a wonderful time seeing that world. So I was happy to write that essay for Vince, and I think I came up with some interesting ideas. I didn't resent it that Vince's weekend editor, in order to put a picture of Leonardo DiCaprio vaulting over a Jeep, took out 1/3 of my essay. Which was going to be my concluding remarks. I don't think I've told Vince, but I know what the newspaper biz is like. But interestingly, though, I didn't hear from anybody in town, but half a dozen people at CC, including good friends, Barry Sarche and Mariana McJimsey and Dave Armstrong and several others, all responded. And we started talking about the movie. We were learning all kinds of wonderful things. So sometimes something controversial can rouse something in you that really is kind of, it brings you to a point of incandescence or aliveness that I just love about what I've worked on. And I think that's part of the joy of it. And I don't know if that's doesn't quite deal with the question. And these people remain friends, of course, but other people not so much. And that's sort of the way it goes.
I'm just going to stay with the same quote because I love it from the people. As forgiven, you will achieve greatness. Is that what it was, Tiffany?
It was forgive and you will change history.
The world. Oh, history. That's right. I would say that for me, it's my family. Thank you to them for forgiving me for not being there all the time. I spent a lot of time at work. I really worked hard in my life and in my career and couldn't spend as much time with them as I could. But I hope that they can look back and go, she's achieved greatness. And I can be a role model for them. But they have been a pillar in my career, in my life, and that's what I would like to say.
Thank you. Thank all of you. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience. Yeah.
I'll start with a comment. John, you probably didn't know that I was going to be a teacher when I was sitting in your class in 74 to 78.
Wow.
I studied all my teachers.
This is your brother?
Sort of. I'm sure that I picked up a little bit of your idiosyncratic way of relating, but what I did pick up mostly was that you allowed. I'm sorry. So I allowed learn from you to allow each student to have his or her own unique voice. And so I appreciate you for that.
Up against the wall is a good place to learn.
Yeah, so 40 years later on the other side of my English career. And then to my sister Winnie, she referred to my mother, but I think there's something about Colorado College that was unique to both of us. She talked about walking through the campus as a high school student. That's because my mother had the courage at 50, after having grown up with parents that didn't want her to have an education, didn't think women should be educated. She, in her 50s, she was interested in geology, because to her that was the essence of being out here in Colorado. So Professor Pearl, who I'm sure has passed many years beyond, just welcomed her. And she did it without grades, without any of the normal incentives. She just wanted to learn. And I think that spirit of wanting to learn and that sense of adventure that Winnie refers to is something we inherited as well. But lastly, I'm going to put Winnie on the spot here a little bit. You kind of referred to your braid. And I know you know that it's kind of a subject you can't talk about without a tear or two, but I think that the story of Mary would serve to personalize your journey a little bit. That is in a very special, unique way. I wonder if you might want to talk about her and how you found her and your peekaboo blank games, and eventually, many years later, she's off on her own. She went through college, right? Didn't she? So tell us a little bit on it.
Leave it to my brother. Put me on the spot. I'll try to summarize a very long story in a few words. When I was working as a medical missionary during genocide Rwanda, the first day I was there, just amidst all the horror and the devastation and human tragedy, I was kind of wondering why the heck I had made that decision. And on the second day, a bunch of nuns, I was walking to the hospital, and they ran after me because they saw the stethoscope and the scrubs, and they literally handed me this child who was probably about 4 or 5 years old and weighed maybe 15 pounds, and was unconscious and comatose and very sick, and we really didn't think she would survive. And anyway, we played a little bit of a game in the beginning, and I learned about her story, and it was one of true horror, and as genocide is descriptive of. She was found literally buried beneath the bodies of her entire family, and she was the only one to have survived, and they actually didn't even think she was there. And one of the UN aid workers I spoke to said he thought he heard a whimper, and so he went back into the hut, found the child, and as she started miraculously to recover, she was sharing a bed with about 10 other toothless munchkins, because there weren't very many beds for a lot of patients. And as she became conscious and alert, you could see that she had suffered something that no human and no child should have to go through. And whenever you made eye contact with her, she would start to whimper again. But she had a little sheet, and she would cover her face with it. And we used to kind of just play a peekaboo game, because it's the only way I could get her to interact. And she would never look at you. She would never respond. She was just in her world of sadness. And one day I was sitting on the bed with my back to all of these little munchkins, and talking to the physician there and figuring out what we were going to do for the day. And my backpack was on my shoulders, and it was open. And I felt a wee bit of a tug and looked back, and this kiddo, who I didn't even think knew I existed really, crawled into my backpack, all 15 pounds of her. She was on a tube, a central line for tube feeding. And she put her arms around my neck, and she would not leave. I mean, she slept with us. She stayed with me for the 3 months I was there, and she became the little Robin Hood, and she would give out little candies and stickers and balloons to all the other children who had gone through the experience that she had gone through. And needless to say, Rwanda was really hot, and needless to say also I was a lot younger, and I had a lot more hair, and it was way curly, and there was no running water, so I knew I had to cut my hair. But she was always, when life got a little real, she would be playing with the braid in the back that would hang back by the backpack, and she would hum a song that I always imagined her mother would sing to her to console her. And she would hum that song and while playing with my braid and would fall asleep. And that was her comfort. So I cut the hair off, but I left the braid, and so that she could play with it. And I ended up leaving a little earlier than expected with a medevac from one of my teammates who suffered a head injury, and we had to airlift him to Nairobi. And at that point, I couldn't get back in. So I went home and spent a long time trying to find her again. And I decided, well, I would cut off my braid when I found her again. And I found her a long time ago, and she's doing great. She now has a family of her own, and my hope at that time was to adopt her and bring her home. And as the universe gives us so much wisdom over the years, we realized that actually her family was there and her mother hadn't been killed. And we managed to reunite her with her mother, and before she died of AIDS, and two of her siblings. And so at any rate, I never cut off the braid, because when I went to Kenya to find Marie and sneak back into Rwanda, I had a lot of other kids who that was their way of learning about the strange, tall Mzungu that was so incredibly foreign to them. And part of that was sitting on my lap and playing with my braid. So as much as I get tired of braiding it, it's still there. So sorry, that was not a short story.
That's okay. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for asking the question.
Yes, I think so.
I think we have time for one more question.
This is actually a question for John. John has become such a leader in motivational, team building, inspirational talks around the country in multiple sports. But we're going to go back a little bit here. And how did your career as a high school hockey coach lead to your success with USA Volleyball?
And Jay is asking a serious question. Those two dudes up there and I coached Doherty ice hockey the first 2 years of their existence. This is 75, 76. At the Broadmoor World Arena, we were the first team, or the last team in the league. So I remember 11 p.m. practices on a Tuesday, followed by 5 a.m. practices on a Wednesday. And, you just sort of slept at the World Arena is probably what you should have done. But our record was, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but I'm just going to say 0-21 and 0-21 or something like that. On the second season. Yeah, okay. That would show progress. But it again taught me at a younger stage in my development of coaching and coaching coaches, which is my main passion, that the outcome is what you can't be focused on. You've got to be focused on the process. And I joke about when volleyball turned 100 years old, I studied every match ever played for the 100 years, and what ended up happening was that 50% of the teams lost. And of course, I didn't do that study. I didn't waste my time doing that, but I use it as a parable for me to understand that if you focus on the outcome, you're going to be disappointed a lot, and it's going to be kind of a struggle. And if you just stay on this always learning and Corre progress mode, you can have a lot of joy and success along the way. Kind of like Will was saying about, the life is to have fun. And if you come to my practices, they're fun, guaranteed. We've got Will here, so let's hear
That's-
every answer to all the questions we've already asked from you.
Thank you. 10 questions, ready? I'm just kidding. I actually have a question specifically for you. So philanthropy seems to be really ingrained in your family's history. Can you talk a little bit about what compels you to give back?
Be glad to. I wasn't raised. I never thought I would ever be in the position to be in philanthropy. I was middle class, but we didn't have a castle and the servants and all that running around in Mercedes. We had just a very normal middle class upbringing, public schools, the whole bit. We got lucky, and I always felt it was very incumbent on me to take our good fortune and give the majority of it back. The reason being is that when you do accumulate wealth, you have to realize that there's only so many things you can buy, and there's only so much you can do. And I always thought to myself, why not? What am I going to hoard this for? Why can't I make a difference in someone else's life? That's why I decided to really get involved in it personally, and really to just share my good fortune with those who need help, need financial aid, need scholarship, need a place to begin and start, and put some investment behind them and see what we get.
Thank you.
My husband calls that magic Kool-Aid.
So I actually quoted you earlier, and I said, the pursuit of life should be fun, which is what you said earlier in your speech today. Then I also talked about another quote I heard from one of our elders from the Ute tribe who are here today, who said, "Forgive and you will change history." So I'm wondering if you want to elaborate either on your quote from earlier or the other quote of forgive and you will change history. Forgive and you will change history is the second quote.
First of all, I want to talk about the fun part. I have a few friends here that I know my history, and I must say we did have a good time, but I've always had fun throughout life. I've made it fun. I've tackled lots of things. I've been scared at times. I've gone into things with trepidation, but I think that what I did right was I went ahead and put my foot in where the alligators were biting. And I said, by God, if someone else has done this, I can do it too. You know? And I just had fun with the experiences. I think life is, I laugh at people, because people are funny. I especially laugh at their foibles. We all have them. We all have our little idiosyncrasies. And I just always elected to look at the funny side of life and the fun side, and even in the midst of the Vietnam War and the assassination of a president and 9/11 and all of these things, I think you have to always keep humor as one of your weapons.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. No, well, you can answer the second one if you want. One more time. Forgive and you will change history.
Forgive. I think forgive or giving, or you will change your forgive.
Forgive, like
Forgive?
forgiveness, like forgive.
Oh, I think you have to forgive. I have been, I don't know, I've met myriads of people who do always tend to, carry and judge you by your past. You kind of have to almost forgive the people for their lack of, a better word, for their lack of clarity in their own mind. And I was very touched the other day when this young man went over and hugged this lady. I know it's a very controversial story, the policeman and the boy, but there was forgiveness right there on the TV screen. And he elected to forgive her, even though she had committed a crime against his brother. And I thought to myself, that's to me what the world should really be about. Is we all err, we all hurt each other at some point, but you've got to forget that and move on. Why carry all that dead weight around with you all the time? Just move on and get going and quit living in the past.
In the past. Great, thank you. This last question is for all of you. Oh, Jill has a question.
This is for all of you also. Looking at this panel, you've all accomplished so much and done so much in your lives. What do you still want to do?
You go first.
No, I've done enough here. I'll speak later.
Leave it to Jill to leave us the hard question. We're all speechless. What do I still want to do? Well, I hope I have a long life to live. My mom is 88, so I hope to at least make it that far. What do I still want to do? I think what I still want to do is I spend a lot of time with the students of color at Colorado College, and they're near and dear to my heart. And I would love to be able to see them all the way through their 4 years, to be able to mentor them, to continue to mentor them. CC's an awesome place, and it keeps you young. And we're here because of the students. And if the students can turn into great alums, then we've done our job. So I think that's one of the things that I would like to continue to do. Want to go back yet?
I have one thing in particular. I want to continue my to be a good steward of my estate. I want to be continue to manage and invest well in people and institutions. I've also learned from the past year that it's never that anything you can do today, do today. And do not put off until tomorrow. The old adage, the old cliche, but it's very, very, very true. And I am so glad, really, that I did go ahead several years ago and make an agreement with the college as part of a planned gift, off of which I built my scholarship. I believe to date we've raised $35 million because of that scholarship. And I'm very, very proud of that. I want to do more of that. And I want to spend the rest of my time, again, enjoying, the days I have. I do feel like I really am, not to get sentimental, but I really do feel like I'm a very, very, very lucky man to be sitting here today. And I don't take it lightly. And I'm going to do everything I can, as I said earlier, to do what I can for the school, things in Tulsa, wherever, to make life richer and better for people.
I think this is more of a personal scholarly goal. You're too far away from me to see that I'm wearing a tie that is made entirely of cats, which my daughter gave me for Christmas a couple of years ago, but there's method to her and my madness, and that my co-author Bob Merrill and I are writing a book on a Raymond Chandler novel called The Long Goodbye, which was made into an extraordinary film by Robert Altman called The Long Goodbye, much better than the novel, as a matter of fact. And the title of the book is Marlowe's Cat. All about, has anyone ever seen this movie? Very few people have. This is another one of my battles. Very few people have. It's a kind of a comedy, but it's also a murder mystery. It's a wonderful, wonderful film about a man who forgets to feed his cat or gives the cat the wrong food. Sounds like a Kafka parable, The Hunger Artist. And the cat takes off on him, and we never see the cat again. So the whole book is about the mystery of Marlowe's cat and who was really Marlowe's only friend. And in the long run, Marlowe discovers many things about other people and who they are and what their secrets are. He makes friends, he makes enemies. The end of the film ends with Marlowe. He kills the man who has destroyed so many lives. He does it. It's startling, shocking in a way, but I think it's deserved. And he's making his way back to the States, back to California from Mexico. And he breaks out into the most wonderful happy dance you've ever seen before, as if somehow the wicked witch of the West is dead, and he can go home and find his cat and find his life and find his love and begin to live in the world again. So Bob and I have to finish. We're both 75 now. It's like you're sitting in the back of the cab and the little thing is going ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. How many coins do you have? We need to finish this book. I think it's going to be wonderful. And as I sort of alluded to during my remarks, the ghost of Humphrey Bogart hovers over everything I do. Taught a bogey class for years. I ended my talk with him mentioning Louis and the beginning of Beautiful Friendship. And Bogart's The Big Sleep is in the book that we'll be dealing with in the same context. So for me, it means a lot. I love the book. I love the movie, so it keeps me happy, and Bob too. But these two geezers have got to get it out of second gear. Let's put it that way. Too many illnesses lately.
It's hard to say. There's only so many years that we all have, and there's so much to do. And when I was a kid, people used to ask me what I wanted to do, and I always thought that was the stupidest question, because you just kind of go for the moment. And I did one thing, and then I found another passion, and then I went in another direction, and I think that's what I want to continue to do. To see where life leads me, and in that life, continues the education that CC started. I'd love to do more traveling. I'd love to learn more about so many diverse populations and cultures and languages and traditions. And, we Americans, in comparison, can be kind of boring. And I'd love to do a lot more traveling, and just, I think, to encapsulate it all, I never felt like I've done enough to give back to the world. And I think if I said what more I would want to do, I would simply say more.
So I grew up near Anaheim in the Disney World, and e-tickets and all that stuff. My hero is Jiminy Cricket. So if you remember his song, how old is he going to live to? He's going to live till he's 103. Okay, so that's my goal. I'm going for 103, on target still. And I leave for Morocco the day after tomorrow for a 2-week course, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff in the South Pacific that I get to do for the next 3 years on an international federation program. But the big thing is, with my wife Lily and my friends like Jay and Brad, we're going to be doing this property up in the Terrials that was mentioned to give back. Ultimately, the dream world is vets and first responder families the entire time, with a family time for Christmas and maybe Thanksgiving or something like that. But to share this valley, because if you have never been, and I bet half of you, maybe more in this room, have never been on Colorado 77, it's this hidden valley that everybody blows by because you're not on your way to Breckenridge, you're not on your way to Buena Vista, you're not going to Deckers, you're not going to over to Cripple Creek. It is magical. There's this badass lady named Isabella Bird who in the 1870s rode her horse up there before she went dashing off to Hawaii and did amazing things in Hawaii. And it is truly a magical valley, and I welcome any and all of you to come up to it, but that's where I'll be when I retire after Tokyo. Tokyo is my last Olympic Games, time for me to move on and do this project at the Lodge with Lily. That's so special.
Thank you. Well, thank you, all of you, for being here. And congratulations again. And I hope you all live to 103 and you're still involved at CC. So thank you.